jump right now into chapter 10, WWJS. That is, what would Jesus say? The first part of this chapter, I pretty much say why Jesus is important, but if you don't know that by now, then I don't even know how you found your way to this book. So we're just going to jump right into the first section, which is shepherd. Real quick, I'm just going to cut through it. It's going to be a short one. All throughout the Bible, New Testament particularly, Jesus equates himself as being a shepherd to the Israelites. And when we look at John 10:11, Jesus identifies himself as being a good shepherd that'll sacrifice himself for his sheep. And, people think, well, all right, well, that's his sheep. The world is his sheep, right? It's we're all the flock of Jesus or whatever, but not the case. Not true. When we look in the Gospel of Matthew, dang, I think I made a typo in here. Oh well. When we look in the Gospel of Matthew, it accounts a woman, that's not of Israelite heritage, and she finds her way to Jesus, and she's like, Jesus, heal my daughter. And he's like, I'm straight. And she's like, Jesus, heal my daughter. She's like, nah, I'm straight. Finally, she's begging and begging, and he's like, you know what? Fine, I'll heal your daughter. She's all good. All right, but the mainstay of this is found in, I think, verse 24 of Matthew 15, which states that, I was only to help God's lost sheep, the people of Israel. So pretty much out of his own mouth, out of his own lips, he pretty much says, the lost sheep, the sheep, Israel, that's my flock. And when we look at John 18:20, Jesus answered him, I spake openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, whither the Jews always resort, and in secret I said nothing. So pretty much he's saying, this is where I hang out. I hang out where the Jews hang out. When we talked about Jesus' ethnicity or whatever in the previous chapters, I think a couple chapters ago, we said that he was opposite to John. He was with the people, and this is what he's saying, I taught in the temples and where all the Jews go. And when we go to the next one, we're going to go to the next section, which is king. And pretty much I'm just going to wrap up king and husband all in the same go. All throughout the Bible, we see Jesus as, obviously the king of the Jews, the king of Israel, even when he was dying or whatever on his, little thingamabob, boom, king of the Jews or whatever. So, and as far as the husband goes, John the Baptist says it over and over. He says it over and over. And I have like a ton of verses saying all the stuff that I'm telling you right now. But for what it's worth, the main verse that I want to touch on is in Revelation 21, 9 through 14. Now I'm reading out of the New Translation. Then one of the angels who held the 7 bowls containing the 7 last plagues came and said to me, come with me, I will show you the bride and the wife of the Lamb. So he took me in the spirit to a great high mountain, and he showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, descending out of the heaven of God. And then go down a little bit. The city wall was broad and high, with 12 gates guarded by 12 angels, and the names of the 12 tribes of Israel were written on the gates. The wall of the city had 12 foundation stones, and on them were written the names of the apostles of the Lamb. So, in 2 different cases right here, we see, excuse me, ooh, man, that was a nasty one. We see Israel being described as, Jesus' kingdom, right, as far as king is concerned. And we also see it as his husband, And pretty much we're gonna go to the next, excuse me, the next verse, or not next verse, the next section, which is know your role. Um, Pretty much it's just important to note Israel's role on this earth. They were supposed to be a kingdom of priests, and these were the people that God has given His holy words to. They were also called to be a light to the Gentiles and a salvation to the end of the earth, just like Christ was. Um, and even then, right? I mean, I'm pretty much just reading right out of the book right here. But when we look at Romans 1:16, there's pretty much a flow chart of how this thing works. It goes from God to Christ to the Israelites to the Gentiles. You know, um, let's see. Yeah, even I even say even Jesus respects this model. Um, but I want to read an excerpt out of this out of the book right here. It's from John 4, verses 21 through 24. Believe me, woman, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain. Ooh, bless me, Lord. Um, nor in Jerusalem. You will worship. Ugh, sorry. Oh, I got one of those half sneezes. This is horrible. Oh man. Oh, this is what hell feels like. Okay, we worship what we do know. Yeah, you worship what you don't know. We worship what we do know. Because salvation is from the Jews. But a time is coming and is here and is now here when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeks such a people to be his worshippers. God is spirit, and the people who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. So, what we see, I guess, a little highlight here is that salvation comes from the Jews, or people from the tribe of Judah, the Israelites, what have you. And when we look at this thing, it's important to note that if you don't even really know who I don't want to say real, right? But if you don't know who I guess for the lack of a better term, if you don't know who the real Israelites or Jews or whatever are, then really, like, um, what salvation is there? So, and then hear people say, well, what about the church? Aren't the churches and the church called to be da 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 da? And the answer is no. I mean, Jesus deeply values the church, but even then, when we look in the book of Revelation, uh and they mention seven churches or whatever, like six out of those seven churches, like, he has something kind of negative to say about. It's not, as far as this is concerned, like, the church has never really been in a good state. And I have a little, I'm just going to read out of the book again. Church is for salvation as money is to happiness. It is merely a means to an end and not the end itself. Once it becomes the end itself for the seeker, then the hope gained from the attempt to attain such happiness is lost through disappointment and despair. So I'm gonna let you just chew on that. Pretty much, I don't want to say the church is not that important. It is important, but as far as this is concerned, and as far as the flow is concerned, getting back to Israel, the Jews or whatever, that's the important part. Which is going to take me right into the next and last section, which is disciple instructions. Let's see. When we notice Jesus's instructions to the Israelites in Matthew 10 verses 5 through 6, excuse me, it says, "Don't go to the Gentiles or to the Samaritans, but only to the people of Israel, God's lost sheep." So there we kind of see the sheep and the shepherd and all this other kind of good stuff. But people say, well, that was when Jesus was still alive. When he died, he told them to go to the world. He told them to go and tell it on the mountain. you know And to that, I'd say that the instructions are still no different, right? So when he says, go out into the world, go and, leave, Jerusalem or Israel, and go into all these different lands and do all that other kind of good stuff. Essentially, he's still giving them the same instructions. He's still telling them to go to the Israelites, the lost sheep, because by this time, due to different conquests and all this other good stuff that we're going to get into, Israel has been dispersed, right? Even then, when we think about Jews, that's only one tribe. There's like 11, 11 more, and it's one of those things where they have been scattered all over. And we see this in James 1:1. It talks about, Israelites or Jews or whatever all over the world. So he's saying, yeah, go to the Jews, go to the Israelites, go to the lost sheep, but they're everywhere. So you need to go everywhere. And even then, right, when we look at, let's see, yeah, when we look at Peter, the rock, the guy, even Peter was skeptical about meeting with Gentiles, right? When we look at Cornelius in the Bible, Cornelius was, pretty much he was a Roman officer, but he was a good guy. He was, he observed the laws. He was a cool dude or whatever. And even then, before Peter even went to this cat, God had to prep him with dreams and stuff. Like, look, all right, I know he's a white boy, but he's cool. He's cool. He had to give him dreams and everything and prep him, because he's like, look, I get it. I know this is not what you're like supposed to do, but he's one of the good, like, he's cool. He's cool. And even then, Cornelius, I think we'll get into this later, but he never thought of, like, even though he was accepted or whatever, he didn't think of himself as an Israelite or a Jew or whatever. Like, he was just he was in the mix. He was cool, but we'll get into that. We'll get into that a little bit later. But even then, when we look at, when they say, he told the disciples to go everywhere and talk to everybody, and obviously I still contend that that's not the case, is because they weren't prepared for that. If they only speak Hebrew, and they all look black or whatever, they can't just go. I don't want to say they can't just go, but in essence, that's one of the reasons why Paul was made an apostle, right? Because Paul was the guy who speaks all the different tongues. Paul is the guy who, and I'm not saying they're dumb. I mean, all the rest of the disciples were, brilliant in their own ways and everything. But, Paul was the scholar. He's the one who wrote he's the one who writes the books. He's the one who speaks the different languages. Like, Paul is that guy. You're not going to take somebody who, kind of just speaks. Even then, if I'm going to hire somebody to go and do this message, am I going to pick somebody who speaks maybe one or two languages, or am I going to pick somebody who speaks like five? Obviously, you're going to pick the person who speaks like five or whatever, and that's Paul. So, with that, I'm going to wrap this up, and we're going to go on to the next one, which is chapter 11, and here's where we start to get into the real meat of everything. This is kind of what I've been waiting for, But chapter 11, the Lost Book of Judah. With that, oh man, you know what time it is? It's plug time. Boom! Stand to Reason, Blacks in the Bible, Raday, Leavy, Twitter, Facebook, all that other good stuff. I will see you later. Peace.